Thank you for joining us on another episode of Beyond the Listing, where we discuss the business of real estate outside of the listing environment. I'm your host, Jeremy Madore, and today I have the pleasure of sitting with
Donna Molet. I am the team leader of Team Molet at Keller Williams North Central. We are a small team of about 5 agents, and I'm the broker and team leader of that team.
I didn't realize you had your broker's license.
I do have my broker's license, although I don't function and operate as a broker. I'm working under the Keller Williams brokerage.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. What's the advantage of having your broker's license while also being in another brokerage? This is not a topic that we've covered.
Sure. Believe it or not, it's a tax basis. It makes... I felt it was valuable use of the time during the pandemic to continue my education, but there's a lot of similarities between the producer's license or the realtor's license and also the broker's license. The broker's license is a little bit more refined in ethics, but the biggest reason is that in order to be compensated as a team, you have to have a broker on the team. So just a difference between being a 1099 employee, but my corporation gets paid for the work that we do, and then we pay the members of my business individually.
So it becomes a hierarchy at that point.
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was always curious why other realtors had. Sorry.
That's okay. Real estate producers or agents.
At least I'm not saying realtors. That's you pronounce it very, very succinctly. But I didn't realize that agents had that level of hierarchy for a team basis.
It's a Massachusetts licensure requirement that compensation be paid to an entity that has a brokerage license. So if the compensation is to be paid to Team Molet, for instance, then Team Molet needs to have a broker on our team.
Got it.
Otherwise, we would all just be 1099 employees through Keller Williams North Central, which is not a bad thing, but at some point it makes more sense for your business tax management
status,
to just have it. Again, it's not necessarily status, but it's just management of expenses. And we're an S corp, so versus an LLC.
I was going to get there next.
Yeah. So it just works for us to be more organized in the manner that we are. So I have a broker's license.
Got it. And primarily that's because you're being paid as the team, and then you're then paying the agent beyond that. Versus the agent being paid directly by Keller Williams North Central, they're paying the team first, and then the agent gets compensation beyond that.
So that's the case for the 2 principals that own Team Molet Corporation. So my husband Jerry and I are both paid on salary, and then we have certain other benefits to being the owners that are salaried. But the other agents on Team Molet are still paid directly from Keller Williams North Central. Okay,
thank you for clearing that up, because I was definitely confused as to how that was working. All right, interesting. Well, that's a unique thing because, obviously, so we're an S corp as well, and we're also sole proprietor. I'm the 100% owner on it, and so of course I have the salary draw in conjunction with the remaining profits for the year is what I get taxed on for income and everything like that. But everybody that works for us is W-2 basis. We don't use 1099 labor at all. And so that's still a very unknown field for me because I haven't dabbled in that at all.
Sure.
So it's interesting to hear how that gets handled with the Keller Williams model.
So I have a W-2 employee, and she is treated as the employees in your organization are as well, right? From a tax purpose, from a compensation purpose.
Sure.
She's an hourly employee and is managed that way. And for our business structure, the combination of a 1099 agent who's getting paid and working with their own expenses as a team agent gives them the flexibility as well as us having, the role and responsibility of a W-2 employee, our office-based employee. It serves us well.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, especially for a lot of the administrative tasks associated with that, because they're not, while they contribute to sales through their efforts, they're not sales drivers, right? And so obviously the W-2 compensation is the way to go for that.
In our business, for me, I think 2024 was a significant year for business organizing, for becoming more streamlined. I met with a business consultant at the beginning of last year and spent about a month and a half evaluating all of our systems and processes. I had already been a broker at that point, but it really was instrumental in outlining ways to replicate quality and be able to have the same thing done over and over again, but not forget any steps.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the best part
Yes,
of
you
of
are
systems.
a systems person.
Correct.
You enjoy regularity and predictability.
I would agree with you, Jeremy, and a lot of that has to do with, I've had a coach in the Tom Ferry organization for about 6 years now, and she highlighted a long time ago that I have a lot of executive function. And what that means is I keep a lot of stuff in my head. I keep a lot of plates spinning.
But it doesn't get written down.
So I surround myself with people and systems that hold me accountable to make sure everything gets done the same way every time.
Sure.
Because every transaction is different. Like you said, when you're sitting down with agents, each one of the agents is different.
Right.
Each one of the properties is different.
Right.
Each one of the deals or transactions is different. How do we make sure that we do all the important steps to ensure quality
Nothing gets
and
dropped.
satisfaction and nothing gets dropped?
Yeah.
You do that by having checklists.
Yep.
You do that by having systems.
Yep, I agree with that. And for us, on our part, it involves a lot of training, and because there's a lot of adaptability to how we do our jobs, right?
Sure.
There's basics, right? Like, did you do your exteriors, right? But when it comes down to like a shot list or whatever, it's very property dependent. So it has, for us, we need to hire people that are quick thinkers on their feet, so that they are responsive to the environment that they're in. So it's a little bit different in that the transaction, if you would, for producing real estate media is very different from a real estate transaction, only because our checklists almost largely don't exist, because you'd have to have a checklist that was so overwhelming, laborious, that it wouldn't apply anymore, to be quite frank.
I appreciate that, but I don't know if you know, but when we go out to a photo shoot with you, we have a checklist.
Okay.
We're checking to see that you've captured everything, because we know what has to go into the very basic outline, all of the boxes that have to be filled in with the MLS listing, which syndicates to Zillow and Realtor and Truly and all of the other consumer sites. There's 100 or so boxes that need to be filled in. We bring that list with us so that we can monitor, okay, yep, they shot that. Oh, they grabbed this. They took a picture of that. Okay, here's that third bathroom that I didn't see them take a picture of that. So it allows us the opportunity to keep our quality assurance, so we're not having a callback and asking you to ever do it again. The good news is we don't necessarily need to ever nudge you to make sure that you did something, but we're checking.
Right. Interesting.
Didn't mean to catch you on that, but
No,
it's easy
no,
enough for you to have that as well.
No, I like
that's
that.
What we do.
I like that. It makes me think about our approach, because frankly, we rely on, and I think confidently rely on, the ability of our staff to adapt to the environment that's presented to them when they arrive. And I guess I take for granted, and that's a bad thing, right? Or it's potentially a
Hazardous.
fraught with peril,
Right? That's fair.
thing to do. And by and large, it hasn't failed us, because we are hiring for people that have an astute ability to observe and maintain completion of the space.
Sure.
And so I think that we embed that in our hiring practices. So therefore, we're not reliant on the checklist, but that doesn't mean that the checklist doesn't have a place. It just means that we haven't implemented one. Okay. All right. Wow. I'm feeling very uneasy right now.
Don't be. Think about it this way. To sell a house, you can put a sign in the yard, put a price on it, and put it on the MLS, and pray somebody comes along.
Sure.
It's a transactional series of steps. To do it well, you need a good person to do it. To do it well over and over and over again, even the best person is ready to do those steps, and then something happens. A snowstorm like today, or something crazy comes up that could get in the way of that person knowing what's the next step that I should be doing. So I do rely on really quality talent. We have the best team, in my opinion, but we also want to make sure that everything is done the same for every client. I rely on systems and people that work with to make sure that I don't forget things. That's really what I'm talking about.
Right.
Your team and my team have done hundreds of projects together, Jeremy, over the years. And I think that I can probably reflect back on 3 times that we've ever had to go back out of hundreds to say, you forgot a bathroom.
Right.
Or, this happened. And those were a long time ago.
Yeah.
So that was why I decided for my team as well, it's important to have checklists. So it's not just at the crossroads of where your business and my business encounter.
I don't hear that.
But in all of our systems, did I ask for a review after we served someone? Did I follow up and make sure that their power got turned on?
Yep.
Did we ask them if they are happy with what we did? All sorts of different things that it's easy to just stop. I sold the house. We can go home now because we're actually probably managing 3 or 4 other sales at the same time.
Yeah.
And just make sure that their needs are all the way met through. That's a checklist. That's a post-closing checklist. And I just find that they're helpful. Not everybody works that way, but for us, it just helps us to not rely on the human nature, which can, get distracted or things happen.
We do have those things come up, especially when things get flustered. You and I have stories to tell, and I'm not going to go down that road right now. But there's ample opportunity in real estate transactions, even if it's just a photo shoot day, for random things to occur that really become a speed bump.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And so I can see the value in having something to reflect back to that takes the emotion or the distraction out of it and puts it back to being fact driven.
I had a background in executive communications and graphics.
Okay.
I've always just been in business development and relationships, but I used to work for a company called Corporate Graphics, and Corporate Graphics had a responsibility to support people who were in corporations that needed graphics.
Okay.
And I learned so much in that environment, and one of the things that I learned was 2 sets of eyes have to look at everything before it goes out the door. So that's been really helpful for me over my existence in making sure, whether it's a contract, whether it's a set of photos, whether it's an MLS listing, that if I develop it, I can't proof it. Somebody has to proof it. So the proofing cycle, I feel like, has been a little bit lost in our fast-paced society of 2024, 2025.
I would agree.
So we have self-publishing. People can make it themselves. But I think it's important to have somebody else look at it.
Self-publishing sounds a lot like error-prone.
Right? Exactly. And so I found that that's very helpful to have, a team approach and also to be humble and not egotistical. I wrote this and I care about it, but here, why don't you take a look at it and see how it sounds?
And because I care about it, I want another set of eyes on it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Because it's not an
that
ego
was really
stroke
helpful.
at that point.
That was really helpful.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I also learned in that company was the difference between the turnaround time on production and the quality. You can't necessarily have both. You can't have a fast quality at high, you can't have high quality and short turnaround time.
Sure.
And I think that's one of the things in real estate that puts the pressure on the photographer and on the media is there's been times when, for a number of reasons, we don't give you enough time. And it might be because there isn't enough time.
No.
There's a
And
situation that we
respect
have
that,
to get
obviously.
that done. And there's been in that specific time where you double up your resources, right? And you'll have 2 people come or sometimes even 3 to get the job done. And that's always appreciated because each person still gets the same amount of time, but it's just stacked in a shorter period of days.
Yeah, that's really the only way to speed it up, right? So the speed part of the job, other than an outlier where it might be like maybe a vacant property or one of our photographers who's extra seasoned, Dylan. The speed part of the job is usually dependent on the size of the property and not much else. There's only so fast you can go, right? And so in order to shorten that window, like you're saying, you double up on labor. But even that creates its own problems because I find that when we double up on labor, we actually increase our error rate, not decrease it.
That's interesting.
And the reason for that is because I think that there is sometimes a lack of conversation that may occur as to who is responsible for specifically what duty. Even if, like, I've been on property before where maybe I'm responsible for photography and that's it, and the other person is responsible for floor plans and video or whatever. There's a certain cadence to our jobs where when we're doing our floor plan, we're also going through and I like to do the floor plan first because it gives me opportunity to investigate the house. And I kind of tidy up as I go along, and anything that you guys might have missed, I might catch or vice versa. We have good conversation, set the tone, get an understanding of what's being accomplished today. There's certain steps that happen during the floor plans, which is strictly an analytical thing. There's no creativity really attached to that genuinely, with some caveats. But it allows me that prep time, right? But if I'm going in blind as a photographer and right from the beginning I'm doing that, well, I make more mistakes,
right?
Because I don't do that walkthrough,
right.
and I don't have the front-loaded information. I don't have the time to settle in like I do when I do floor plans, right?
I think it's the equivalent of reading the recipe all the way through before you start cooking.
Yes, I think that's a good analogy. That's a very good analogy. And so doubling up on labor, while it does speed up the total process, it actually creates holes in the process.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so there's a danger there. But going back to what you were talking about the high quality and fast pace, there's a old adage. So I come from the print industry myself, and I was a graphic designer for a number of years for both a print shop as well as a corporate caterer prior to becoming self-employed. And so with me, with that journey rather, I brought with me an old adage that used to kick around the print shop quite a bit: speed, quality, and price. Pick two.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
And it's hard because like what you want to do is try to find the sweet spot between all three and just hit right the middle. But it's really dependent on the individual that you're working with,
right,
and what their values are.
Sure.
And you have to be a bit of a chameleon with that. And that's, I think, for us personally, has been the largest challenge that we've encountered, is trying to be that sweet spot for everybody that we work with. And a lot of times we miss that middle spot because different customers have different values.
Agreed.
Right?
Agreed.
How do you work with that in your own team and your own client list?
I suspect that we share a lot of the same pain on that, because the first time I train folks that are on our team that are going to be then accompanying the photo shoot or photo day or picture day or video, they're trained pretty high level. We want this to look like the nicest Airbnb you've ever been in.
Right.
When you go to an Airbnb, there might be a plant on the table, but there's not a toothbrush, right? If you want all horizontal surfaces to not be a distraction, and that is the way I want it done.
Right.
So that's how I'm going to train them.
Sure.
And then you go to perhaps a situation where it's a multifamily and it's a tenant, and the tenant is not as precipitory. They're not going to see the same need. They don't necessarily want to or have any reason to clean everything out. They might be a tidy person, and I'm sure they all vary, but there might be times or places where this place is just rough.
And they don't share in the success of this.
And they don't share in the success of this. So whether it's a rental or whether it's just a situation where there's too much to do, we do have to just embrace it
yep.
and get it done
yep.
and do it that way. And that's a little bit hard, I think, because I've been surrounded by people that also have a very high level of expectations and perfection, that we do want it to look great and clean. And so I think it's just a case of just trying to tell folks, I'm sure you've seen the picture or lived it, where there's a whole laundry basket of the odds and ends that the realtor is hiding behind the door with while they take the picture and shuffle it from room to room, and
which becomes increasingly difficult when video is involved.
Agreed.
I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges of video. Actually, is working on a room-to-room or even floor-to-floor environment, where there is what we call live editing or live staging is being included for that day. And a lot of times we can't avoid that really, because people need to live, and I want them to live obviously in their environment. So to displace them so drastically from their day-to-day so that you have that Airbnb feel, it's really tough, especially if you got kids or if you have an elderly parent that you're also taking care of. It's near impossible. How many times have we moved like a back stretcher, like one of those inverters? Or how many times have we had to play games with compositing a photo where I take an image of a room and you have the mess on the left. So you keep the right portion of that image and then you move everything over and you take the same picture again, and now all of a sudden you have a clean room. Because we have nowhere else to put it. You can't do that with video. Right. And that's a challenge.
So one of the, we are approached all the time by different partners to offer, that they are offering services. And one of the new services that they're offering is just that, is the video AI, CGI staging and editing of video. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. I think it's also for me a balance of the weather too. So right now we have a house that we'll be listing in early March. And it's ready to go for photos. So I could give you extra time, and I could give all of us extra time and take the pictures now inside. But the shots out the window are going to show snow.
Yep.
And if we were to do exteriors, it might be green, not green, but at least not snow-covered grass at the time that we go to list. And then this listing will look old. The pictures online will look old. So there's always that balance between, the natural, whether it's clutter or whether it's elements such as foliage or things like that. That it's a balance finding. When do you shoot? Right? Is it the right answer? One other thing that we've done, Jeremy, that I think it helps in tandem is that we do a complete walkthrough before staging. Before photos. So one of the things that we've done is to take a complete walkthrough before your team comes in. And we didn't always do that. And it makes for a much easier day of pictures because we know what to expect. Or we can walk through with a client and give them a list and say, in the living room, can we lose the sock tree or whatever else? Can we get some of these things out of here? We want to ask you to cooperate with us so that we can get the most for your house and be ready on picture day where we really only have 2 hours to put the best shine on your property as possible.
Yeah, it really is a short window, isn't it?
Yes.
And there's a lot of prep to get to that window. And then once it's done, like there is a little bit of a breath of relaxation at that point.
Certainly.
Because you're like, that's done. But then there's that new ramp up of, okay, now we have to go for listing and open house. And that open house really needs to match picture day.
And the pictures that you provide, that's helpful because I say to people, you see how these look? Don't they look nice? Right?
Yeah. I mean,
can you make it look like this, please?
Right. The feedback that we get a lot of times is that people can't believe this their house, right? Because they're seeing it from a whole new perspective, right? And obviously when you're viewing a photo, it's very different from what you see in person.
Right.
And not because of any trickery, but because of maybe the height that we're using for taking that photograph, the wide angle lens versus, our 2 human eyes. And so they see it from literally a different eye. And at that point, I know that some have that dawning realization of, oh, this is what you guys were trying to achieve.
Sure.
And others have this pushback of like, it doesn't look like my house, right? Because they don't see it the same way.
Right.
And that's always a difficult dice roll.
So the purpose of the listing photos is not to sell the house. The purpose of the listing photos and video and floor plans is to get people to come to the house. So sometimes when you deliver back to us a package of 100 beautiful photos, it's our tendency to want to put all of those online. And then the people can make their decisions. The shoppers online can make their decision completely without ever actually seeing the house.
Right.
And that's not what we want.
Sure.
The purpose of the listing photos is to
Entice.
present it in such a way that it entices people to come to see this beautiful asset that they could own. And that's where I also think that we come in to take what you have given us, and then we have to pare it down and choose.
Yeah.
Just to give people enough. There's so many times, I agree with you. I think you just said this, that I'm working with clients, or Caitlin on our team is working with buyers, and the first thing that they say when they get to a house is, oh, the listing pictures didn't look like this at all.
Right.
And you have to be careful with that, because if you do, or if we work with you and everybody does too good of a job, people get to the house and they're disappointed.
Right.
We want people to
It's a fine line.
We want people to get to the house. And I don't want to give you an Oscar for the best, acting job of this was an amazing, bigger, beautiful house. I want to give enough so that it's the right size house, it's priced right, and people want to come see it and make it their own and make their own decision.
Yeah. I agree with you on that. There is definitely a tendency to try to, not a tendency. I think that there's a lot of draw in the idea of overselling a property.
Sure.
Because, you have like what the appraiser sees, what the inspector sees, what the photographer sees, right?
Yeah.
So you have like all those different versions, you got Pinterest and reality kind of thing. And you need to find a way to walk the line in between those and kind of shoot it up the middle. What will entice people, but not create a vision of the place that is disassociated from the reality of it.
Right. Whether it's a house or, it's I don't know, a tool that you would use for camping or something. If you were sold hard on something and you buy it and it doesn't work, you're dissatisfied.
Very much.
And so it's important in our role to not over-embellish a property in either just with pictures or even in description. Yes, it's in our ethics and it's a code violation to do that. But just as a human, ethically, I just don't want to tell somebody something is something that it isn't.
Right.
And then they get there and they're disappointed. They wasted their time. They're going to not go through with this. But I just don't want anybody ever to get something that they are. It's not what we said it would be, and that's the part that I think that photos give you a quick glimpse and video gives you a little bit more of a look. It's interesting. I have clients that have been looking for years and they're so good at studying photos now. They can look at all types of video angles
because they've
and the
understood
floor
it
plan.
now.
They get it. That's right.
But that only comes through experience, right? And I work in the field, but I have to say, even I sometimes fall victim or I'm prone to looking at it and be like, oh, wow. Right. And that's me being in the industry. Right. And so even when we've purchased 3 homes total altogether so far. And, in the process of each one, I still fell victim to the glazed over thing, right? Like you're like, oh wow, this place is great. And then you fail to see the reality of some situations, right?
You live there a few years and realize, well, this is not.
Why didn't I see that? Or why didn't I give credit to that, the fact that we were right next to a hospital? That sounded great when we were thinking about it, but the ambulance is not so great, right?
Understood.
That's when we lived on Washington Street in Leominster. But it was one of those things where the reality of living in a space for a while longer after you've shopped it, those things start coming out and the awareness of what you actually purchased, right? Like that. And that's the potential for maybe some buyer's remorse or some cold feet, right? But the goal here is to try to represent a property in the proper light, not necessarily in its best, but in where it's steeped in reality.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
I remember one time, and I can't remember where the home was, but there was a water tower in the backyard of a property that I had photographed once, and it was not you.
I was trying to think.
Nope, it wasn't you.
Sold a water tower yet.
But I was photographing the exterior of the home, and the water tower was in the woods behind the property. It was just kind of like bumping up in the middle of nowhere kind of thing. And I was instructed by the agent to avoid at all costs the fact that water tower was there. And I'm like, every ounce of me was screaming at me. And I'm like, no, that's not right. And so I photographed it anyway and delivered it to the agent.
In both formats.
Right? In both formats, with and without, here we are.
It's on you.
It was super hard with the drone because the drone, you couldn't take a picture of the front of the house without getting it. And so I had to angle it in a very awkward way to the point where it was compromising the image.
Sure.
And so my ethics was just yelling at me, which is why I did both. It's up to the agent to use it at that point. It's off, I washed my hands of it kind of thing, but it's really frustrating to see that behavior exist sometimes.
Yeah.
And because when people arrive, they're going to see the water tower. Mm-hmm. Just embrace it. You just got to go with it.
Yeah, it's a cool water tower.
Yeah, it means you have good guaranteed water pressure. That's a good thing.
There's you talked about pick 2, right? The old term, the quality, the time, the cost.
Yeah.
There's another one that they say in real estate is there's a butt for every seat.
Yep.
There's someone that's going to sit in every single seat. There is someone that's going to buy that house.
Yep.
When the price is right, let that be.
Yep.
Let that be. Don't think that you can outsmart other people that don't want to buy a house with a water tower in the backyard because you can't.
If you have to trick your clientele to loving a house, you're being a very dishonest individual.
Agreed. And I feel, even with all of the, I had a nice conversation with some potential buyers last night, and she said, well, how long is your buyer's agency agreement, required to be? And I said, well, one showing, we like to have at least 30 days to get to know each other. But I don't want anybody to be contractually required to work with me. You work with me because you like me.
Right.
If you don't like me, break up with me then.
Yeah.
Right? You should have the right to get out. If I'm not serving you, how fun is that?
Yeah.
Neither one of us are going to be happy.
Yeah, we don't ask for contracts when we're dating people.
No. Right? But now They make us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we are required to. We're required to have a buyer's agency agreement to show a property. And that can be jarring. If you think about Zillow and other consumer sites where they click a button and show up at a house and they're like, well, who are you? Well, I'm the agent. You clicked on the button. I need you to sign this contract that agrees that we're going to work together and you're going to pay me, whether you like me or not.
Sight unseen.
That's a little tough. It has made for
scary.
a different conversation. And I did a series of educational videos on this a month or two ago to talk about why I don't think it's a bad thing in some ways, because it required you to not do the first meeting at the house, because it's not about that house. Mm-hmm. It's about you as a real estate agent serving that person who is stepping into probably one of the biggest financial decisions of their lives. If they were familiar with this world, they probably have a real estate agent that they know because they've used one before. Mm-hmm. If they're clicking a button online and spinning the wheel and just getting whoever they get,
that's green.
That's green,
Yep.
right? They really should have the opportunity to sit down with someone, as I did last night, and as I know every other agent does every night of the week.
Yep.
After dinner, we're going to have a Zoom call and we're going to talk about it.
Sure.
Or meet at the office and say, what are your needs? Where are you at in your journey? And so that when we meet at that property, we're not using them and that as a way to get to know each other.
Yeah.
We've invested it.
Yeah, that's dangerous, because at that point it becomes an emotional decision. It's not.
Sure.
It's like shopping for cars at a dealership without researching cars prior.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because now at that point you're beholden to whoever, whatever car salesperson you arrive at. Right.
Exactly.
You walk into that foyer, and they just they pounce, right? But you already are emotionally attached to the idea of buying that car, and so it's a dice roll.
It is.
And so unless you're working with someone that you trust and know, who you believe or have evidence to believe that they have your best interest at heart, you're really at the mercy of whatever deal they claim that they're going to provide you. And obviously, car sales and home sales are very, very different in a lot of
ways.
regards.
They are. In a lot of ways. I think that you could have similarities, but it's interesting to me the way that the entire settlement of the NAR lawsuit landed, because I think that what was intended for disclosure, we sort of have a secondary level of service to buyers that I'm not sure that was the original intent. I believe in my interpretation of it was more that the people selling their house did not think it was fair, that they were not clear on the fact that they, the seller, were actually paying the buyer's agent to negotiate against them. And that was sort of the foundation of it. But at the end of the settlement, it really is a service to the buyers that now we're having conversations that nobody ever had before.
Sure.
It was just assumed that I'll get paid by those people over there. But you should know what you're getting.
Yep.
You should know what you're getting. You should know how good the person is or not, or if you're not a good fit.
Yep.
So I'm okay with the responsibility that we have to slow it down a little bit. Slow it down a little bit. Let's figure out, what do you want? And using a house to get to know a person isn't a crime, but we now need to make sure that you have to have, it is a crime, I guess, if you don't have the contract ahead of time.
Strictly technically speaking, yeah.
Yeah, that's different now.
What are some ways that an agent can employ to slow down a relationship with a buyer?
So, believe it or not, this tool of the buyer agency contract and also financing are good ways that you can slow things down. I still do open houses, even though we have our team. And a lot of times at an open house, I'll start to ask people questions. And when it's clear that they're not necessarily comfortable with the answer, an offer as a courtesy to have a conversation just to educate them on some considerations that they should have before they start shopping for houses. I tell people all the time, step one is assemble your team. And that's a way to slow it down. Assemble your team.
And that's inclusive of your lender?
That's your lender, that's your realtor, and it could even be your attorney. But people that you trust, that you want to talk to, and see whether or not they're the right people to help you in this. And there's a lot of things, I don't know, I can operate scissors, but I don't cut my own hair. I can operate a drill, but I'm not going to work on my own teeth. I am not a good photographer. I hire really good people that are experts. should be the same for real estate.
Yep.
I asked one gentleman I was on the phone with this morning, I said, how many houses did you sell in the last 12 months? I'm at 50. I mean, this is your first. Maybe we should consider the perspective of someone who has done this every week.
Yeah.
And, that's I certainly wouldn't be disrespectful to him, Jeremy. We're just, joking about it here. But the reality is, slow it down by giving people information and helping them to see that there's more that they can learn for free in the comfort of either their own home or our office. Here's the hard part. When you're new and you're excited and you know that house that just came on will be gone in this market in a week. Still. On any given day in Massachusetts, when I started in this business, it used to be 35,000 homes for sale. And now today, not including the Cape and the Islands, and not necessarily including condos, there's really only about 3,000 homes for sale.
Yeah. 1/10 the amount.
1/10. Yeah. So the culture is people will spend less time evaluating whether this is a good house to buy than they spend on, is that a good prom dress to buy? Yeah. And it's just not fair. It's not fair. So anything that you can do to educate yourself or work with someone that has some wisdom of experience, just soak up what they have to teach you and slow it down, because this house you're looking at today, that we're meeting at today, it's already gone. You're not ready to buy this. You're not ready to buy this. You weren't going to win anyway. So let's do this. Let's get you ready and educated so that you're able to be ready, and then we can figure out, where do you want to live? Where do you want to live? Did you notice that this place has a water tower in the backyard? You didn't? Well, how about if we knew about that before you took your Sunday afternoon and forfeited football games and time with your family and drove all the way out here to look at this thing that I could have told you if we had worked on this ahead of time, it's maybe not a good fit for you. Or maybe it is. Yeah. So we slow it down by offering to just talk to people and get them ready to go. I think most people know now they need to be pre-approved. They need the financing, or figure out how you're going to pay for it.
I think at minimum that message is out there.
I hear myself say that, and then I remember the folks that I was talking with last night shared with me that they did not think you could buy a single family home with less than 20% down.
Why are these myths still persisting?
So I think it goes back to the self-publishing. Anybody can say anything that they want and put it out there on a podcast, in a blog, in an Instagram post. And I think that people are in some ways starved for facts, but flooded and just deluged with information whether or not it's true.
Yeah, information isn't facts.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because opinions start coming out, or people may be well-meaning in their guidance that they're providing.
Sure.
I think from a percentage down standpoint, it's wise to get close to 20%.
Sure.
Right? But that doesn't mean that it's necessary.
Right.
Right. And even then, it may be necessary for some financial situations, or it might be wise to go for the slimmer, percentage down and keep in reserves.
Exactly.
Depending on what it is that you're purchasing.
My brother taught me a long time ago when he and I worked together that the situation is the boss. It's everyone's unique situation. The situation is the boss. We have our steps, we have our guidelines, we have our procedures, but the situation's the boss. And sometimes you need to call an audible and figure it out. The situation in this particular case might have been that they're paying $3,200 a month in rent, while they try desperately to save enough money to get 20% down on a house that they want. Well, we can maybe look at some options there. I'm very careful spending other people's money, very careful as a realtor to spend other people's money and help them to make their own choice, what makes sense for them. But it should be a choice that's made with accurate facts. I'm always trying to go back to, I'm a fact-based salesperson.
Full set of information.
Has to have the full story.
Yeah.
Right?
And don't just give them a small window to peek through.
Right.
Because that's dangerous. Making decisions based on limited information is very rarely a successful endeavor.
Right.
And I think that we live in a society, like you're saying, the speed of the transactions combined with what looks like all the information available at our fingertips, it doesn't always tell the whole story, like we've been talking about. And I think that if it's one thing that I'd love to see happen with the industry, it's fuller transparency of what a home is on the market. And when I say fuller transparency, I'm talking about being able to tear down the wall of, you take the MLS listing description.
Sure.
Oh boy, the words that are being used, right? They're all plucking at people's heartstrings,
Sure.
right? And I get there's that intent on the sales aspect of it, that marketing aspect of it. I get that. But the truth of the matter is, if the facts of the room sizes and the square footages and maybe ceiling heights, or if those facts, along with the images, along with the map pin of the neighborhood, if those right there aren't enough to like get somebody to say, yeah, that fits us, then that MLS write-up is, I guess, redundant to a degree. Do you agree or disagree?
So I think I agree, Jeremy, because you don't have to put in room descriptions. You don't have to put in room sizes. Those are not required fields.
They're not. Okay.
I have to answer whether or not it has solar, but
Okay.
I don't have to answer whether or not it has a living room. I do not have to. You can go to the MLS right now and look at plenty of listings where agents phoned it in as an expression. I mean, it is, there's no room sizes. There's no information. There's no seller's
Why isn't
disclosure.
that a requirement?
You're asking the wrong person. So as far as transparency and what is required and what isn't, you don't have to say a lot about the property. And so one of the things again
That's perilous.
that we do, it is perilous. It is perilous, but you can see it all the time. You can see it all the time where some people will have 3 pictures, another listing might have 42 pictures. Some people will have a virtual tour. Some people don't have any floor plans. So I guess I do agree with you that people should be given more information, period, and also a professional agent to assist in acquiring that exists.
Right.
So if I look at a listing online for a client and it doesn't have room sizes, I have my pocket little laser measurer and I have my contract of a buyer's agency requirement, and I'm going to go and I'm going to look at it for them before I waste their time on it.
Sure.
So I think if you try to make this more and more and more of a self-service model, people that are somewhat seasoned can probably figure it out. But at the same time, I do think it's important to navigate the waters with some wisdom. You know, with some of that. So I would like it, I think, if the MLS revamped a lot of their requirements. You know, they changed the language on what we can call different rooms, and I sometimes it matches what the photography descriptions say. Sometimes it doesn't. We have to guess what's available. I have a house that the one we're putting on in March, and we were there, and there's 3 rooms in the basement. Well, how many can be a family room? You can only have 1 family room, or only 1 playroom. We can only use each description the one time. So trying to figure out if MLS has any solutions to that. I don't see that coming.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people will just default to the other.
Yes.
And the problem with other is that you then have to go describe what that is maybe meant for, or the proposed uses of it.
Sure.
And that's challenging, of course, because from a language standpoint, there are things that you can and cannot say, and that's hard for the agent. So it's like from an MLS standpoint, it appears that they're trying to be as gray area as possible.
Yeah.
And that's frustrating though, because you have to then independently navigate, the permissible terms or whatever.
Right.
And they're not.
Well, they let you know on that.
Yeah.
They won't let you hit save if you said family or walking distance, because that's discriminatory.
Right.
But I also see that, there's plenty of folks that will use ChatGPT to write their MLS description, and they all look exactly the same. But nobody writes your room descriptions, or meaning nobody does the floor plans and which rooms. So that's the part that, you'll just see those left out. And I think that's, really where the trouble lies.
Sure.
In the MLS description. So the MLS has a long way to go, I think, to catch up to a lot of the other, the software itself is just archaic, but it is what we have for a tool.
I agree. I've long wanted to rattle some doors over there.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things where we're beholden, unfortunately, to their systems. When we're looking at data like this, right? It's important that there's some form of consistency and uniformity amongst platforms, right? And this is one of the challenges I think that people have when they're talking about syndicated networks like Realtor.com or Zillow or whatever. that there is so much variation between MLSs, and that what these syndicated websites take in, is somewhat homogenized only because they found a way to do so, but not necessarily always complete, because different MLSs provide different levels of requirements, right?
Additionally, I think it's important for consumers to know that the consumer sites are marketing sites. Who pays for Zillow? Realtors. Realtors who want to be listed on Zillow pay advertising fees to be listed on Zillow.
Yeah.
And I don't know that when John Q. Public looks at a house on Zillow and sees how pretty it is and wants to go see it, and Zillow advertise a big banner that says, click here if you want to see this, they think they're getting the listing agent for that house. They're not. They're getting a listing agent that paid to be listed there and advertised there. And I feel like when you talk about transparency, I wish there was more transparency on that.
That's fair. All right.
Same for Realtor.com. Sure does sound like that's the Realtor's website.
Right.
It's a marketing site.
Not even close.
Trulia, Redfin, all of these are marketing sites. And I think it's important for people. I wish that people knew that more than the size of the living room or the, whether or not it's got a water tower in the backyard.
Okay.
I wish people knew that when they're clicking on a consumer site, the consumer site should have to disclose, that's not the listing agent. That's somebody who paid to be advertised on this site, so that you'll click on them and then we get, a commission as well on that.
I can side with that. I'm going to find myself lockstep with you on that. That's a good point. Yeah. It feels deceiving.
It's like so many things that, people will see out there, as far as marketing, whether it's real estate or something else. We talked about the car dealership earlier, the old bait and switch. If there's an advertisement and then you get to the dealership and they don't have that car anymore. They have one that's very similar.
Oh, that just sold this morning.
Exactly. So, I think truth in everything is important, and it becomes on an issue of whether or not you ever go back to that dealership, how you were made to feel. And so it's interesting. There's a little bit, to use the car analogy, a lot of the car sales now are more self-service. It is what it is. And what they try to do is to get rid of sort of the slimy experience that a lot of people had, where things were less than truthful. And I think that the barrier to entry to become a car salesman is low. You just show up and, you can
I'd say
get a
it's
job
significantly lower than taking the real estate exam.
But I also don't think that the barrier to entry to become a real estate agent is very high.
It's not high enough.
40 hours,
right?
And same with the becoming a loan originator and things like that. They're not that high. When you were in school, maybe they taught you the Pythagorean theorem, but they didn't really teach you about how to run a checkbook or what to check if in buying a house. When you're a real estate agent, they teach you a lot of things, but they don't teach you the stuff you need to know. There's a lot out there that it just comes from experience. When I don't know if in your college education how much they talk to you about aperture and all of the other things that you now use in your job for just running photography.
If I had gone for a photography degree, they would have.
Right?
I actually went for a computer programming degree.
Okay.
And so photography was a self-taught endeavor for me, through trial and error and experience. But I didn't just end up in real estate quickly. It was a long journey to get there.
Sure.
And it was a little bit accidental in the fact that I got called in by somebody who was just kind of kicking the tires on hiring a professional, and I didn't know what I was doing. And so I used the first couple of properties as kind of my greening up.
Sure. Sure.
And I kicked the can down the road a couple of times, and lo and behold, it stuck enough because I overcame any shortcomings that I did have from a photography standpoint with gobs of customer service and willingness to try hard.
Sure.
Right. And I think that any profession that can also happen in, but the question is whether or not you're able to get in step with what needs to happen in order for you to continue to scale.
Right.
Right. So you can probably have a limited success with enough effort, but then there's burnout territory where you're like, I'm just not getting it. I'm giving up, right? Or you start petering out. And likewise with real estate, that also occurs as well. People will come into the industry and they'll have a lot of gusto, or they have high hopes for their first year or 2 years.
Right.
And they might maybe have one or two transactions because their network is like, maybe the market is allowing for that to happen
Sure.
because of its
Sure.
of a burgeoning market, or maybe they just have the right level of demographic in their circle where people are now buying homes because they went to college with them or whatever, and that's enough of an in. But long term, that doesn't hold up.
Right.
What holds up is applied experience and reliability and consistency and all those checklist kind of things that you're talking about.
Sure.
And yeah, I've seen ample number of agents that pass the exam, but they don't know real estate because they're not being taught real estate. They're being taught a contract.
Sure.
Right. And I think that, back to the transparency question, I think there needs to be more investment up front with teaching people how to handle transactions from a person standpoint, and not so much just a code of ethics, but also here's why.
Sure.
And here's how that impacts your long-term career. This is how you play nice with people.
Right.
Like all of those little nuances that you can't get schooled on. Just like you were talking about the Pythagorean theorem versus how to balance a checkbook.
Sure. Sure.
And it's frustrating to see that continue to persist.
One of the things that Keller Williams, because there's so many different real estate brokerages where people can land.
Yep.
Keller Williams was known for a long time as an educational company where people also sell real estate.
Okay.
And now they're a technology company where people also sell real estate. But one of the things that you had a gentleman put an offer in on a property the other day, and he was so far off. Everything was wrong. And it was one of the listings that I was managing, and I said, I need to ask you, are you new?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, brand new. No idea what I'm doing. And I said, are you working with someone at your brokerage that's giving you some mentoring? And that I think is different. And that's what's needed is somebody to mentor you. When you have people that you bring on here that are newer, have a skill set and have what it takes, but they they shadow someone else who has experience.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that our Keller Williams office does is we have, your first 3 transactions, it's a requirement that you mentor unless you have a certain level of production. But if you haven't done 3 transactions in the last year, you mentor with someone.
Yeah.
And it's their job and responsibility to just help you with the why. Why are we doing it this way? Well, why would we ask that question? What's the difference between a conventional loan and an FHA loan? And how does that apply to this particular property? Mm-hmm. They didn't teach you that in how does it apply to this property? They don't teach you that in your 40-hour real estate class.
No, they don't.
3 years ago that you did, while you were part-time
Certainly.
teaching, and now you're to a point where you're trying to do this for your full-time job, and you're struggling. And you're struggling, but that also means that you're in a position of responsibility to counsel and advise people on a huge decision. And there's so many negative consequences if you don't get that right. To you, to them, to the person trying to sell the house. So I do like the idea of being teamed up with someone and being mentored, or just at least have a buddy system for a while.
You really need to. So for here, we normally go 4 to 5 weeks for our training course, and that is you're partnered up with somebody for that duration of time, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, but the truth of the matter is they'll usually get 75 homes underneath their belt in the process.
Yeah, you guys are
75.
busy. That's a lot.
And that equates to about 160 to 200 hours worth of training.
Right.
And that's FaceTime with a seasoned photographer that is a more in-depth understanding as to the why we are doing what we're doing, and not so much the how. I mean, obviously, the how is just as important, but I'd say that for a longer thought process, educating people on the why is more important than the how.
Sure.
Because if they understand the reasoning behind the choices that you're making, and not just simply that you're making that choice, they're going to start thinking a little bit more abstractly when they enter a home that they've not been in before. Because you can have 2 identical colonials as far as the architecture, but because of how they're decorated or painted or furnished or whatever, they're going to get photographed differently.
Right.
And so understanding the why and the how combined really makes a good, successful transaction for the photographer. And so similarly for real estate agents, I'm sure that the same thing happens because no 2 transactions are the same.
That's right.
But it's not so much why are they different or how are they different, but understanding the underlying causes that create the differences or the extenuating circumstances that you have no control over, right? Whether it be financing issues or inspection issues or whatever it might be.
Agreed.
But it's interesting to see the depth that exists within different industries that are parallels with other industries, right? You're bringing your corporate graphic background to real estate,
right?
And it's still applicable.
It is. It's presentation. It's project base. It's customer service. It's trust. It's quality assurance. But it's just a different product,
right.
And I think in your world as well, having the background in computer programming helps you to see the logic. Because it makes you a logical person.
That's why I'm a systems. Other than I hate checklists. I hate checklists. I'll have to revisit that with the team.
I love checklists that other people check off. Let's be clear.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. You yourself don't like checklists, but you enjoy.
I like that they exist. I don't want to operate them.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. I can subscribe to that, Donna. Donna, it's been really nice to sit down with you and discuss something that I didn't even think would come up.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate the opportunity, and I love working with your team, and this was really nice today.
Thank you, Donna.